welcome for all of you who are tuned in. You're watching TMH as we bring you our daily English news. Our headlines for today: international community's willful indifference to Abiy and Isaias's regimes, aerial bombings and shellings have exasperated the Tigrayan people's pain and suffering. African members at the UN Security Council put efforts to put the Ethiopian conflict on the agenda, and U.S. Senator says failure to sanction Ethiopians perpetrators of gross human rights violations within the Tigray region sets a bad precedent for other nefarious actors. As we move on to our main updates, international community's willful indifference to Abiy Ahmed's and Isaias Afwerki's regimes, aerial bombings and shellings exasperating the Tigray people's pain and suffering. The government of Tigray has issued a statement on the Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki's regimes and aerial terrorism and contempt for peace. The statement said that Abiy and Isaias's regimes have been stymied by Tigray's forces. Determined resistance have resorted to terrorizing and murdering innocent civilians through indiscriminate aerial bombings and artillery shelling of civilian targets as well. The latest episode of aerial terrorism took place in Adi Daaro, located in northwestern Tigray on the 22nd of this year. Invading Isaias's regime's Air Force dropped bombs on the residential neighborhood, killing a number of civilians, injuring and scores more, reducing residential homes to ashes. According to the statement again, the Abiy Ahmed regime invited a foreign enemy to the brutalization of the people of Tigray, and this foreign enemy has been all too happy to comply. On the day of the Adi Daaro massacre, Abiy Ahmed's regime had bombed Shura city as well, and in addition to previous drone strikes on the city targeting once again civilians. In the statement, the blamed international community's willful indifference to these attacks and consequent failure, holding these sadistic regimes accountable for their flagrant criminality for the series of attacks across the entirety of Tigray. The government of Tigray stated, "Tired rhetoric urging all sides to cease hostilities is dangerous," adding only one side currently, the Abiy Ahmed's regime, along with its domestic and foreign partners, is standing in the way of peace. It also noted with sadness that the international community continues to treat the invaders' barbarity as an intrinsic feature of the conflict rather than as part of their premeditated plan to exterminate once and for all the people of Tigray. The government of Tigray said it remains, even at this critical juncture, committed to an immediate negotiated cessation of hostilities to be followed by a permanent ceasefire and political dialogue, rather than reciprocating on the September 11th announcement to that effect that Abiy Ahmed's regime and its allies launched a massive offensive in an elusive quest for a position of strength to be leveraged in peace talks. It noted that Tigrayan forces' engagement over the past few weeks and the enemy's staggering battlefield losses have proven that the people of Tigray simply cannot be subjugated. According to the statement again, the people of Tigray are fighting to preserve their right of self-determination and ensure their survival as a humankind. It added, insofar as a peaceful path it helps to achieve these aims, the people of Tigray has no desire to shed any ounce of blood nor prolong this conflict even a day longer. A government of Tigray called the international community to get the Abiy Ahmed's regime to take concrete steps towards peace and negotiation talks. Failing that, the people of Tigray will continue to exercise their legitimate right of self-defense, it made sure to underline. Tigrayans in the diaspora continue to demonstrate against aerial attacks and shellings of these civilians' targets within the Tigray region. The Tigrayan diaspora in the U.S. today held demonstrations calling on the countries like the UAE and Turkey to make sure they stop funding the genocidal campaign of Ethiopian and Eritrean government. Let's take a listen.
UAE! Turkey!
Stop all drone sales to Ethiopia!
Stop all drone sales to Ethiopia!
Free Tigray from massacres!
Free Tigray from massacres!
Free Tigray from bombings!
Free Tigray from bombings!
Free our children from bombings!
Free our children from bombings!
Free our children from massacres!
Free our children from massacres!
Free our fathers and mothers from massacres!
Free our mothers and fathers from massacres!
Free our families from bombing!
Free our families from bombing!
Free our families
Tigrai from massacre.
Free Tigray from massacres.
Free Tigray from massacre.
UAE. Stop funding the Tigray genocide.
Stop funding the Tigray genocide. Turkey.
Stop funding the Tigray genocide.
Stop funding the Tigray genocide.
Turkey, stop bombing our families.
Turkey, stop bombing our families.
Turkey, stop bombing.
Welcome back, and you're still tuned in to TMH's Daily English News. As we move on to our next update, U.S. Senator says failure to sanction Ethiopia's perpetrators of gross human rights violations within the Tigray region sets a bad precedent for other nefarious actors. Senator Bob Mendes told a Senate hearing that despite horrific human rights violations and the loss of lives of 500,000 people in Tigray, the U.S. has not sanctioned any Ethiopians with blood on their hands. Let's take a listen.
Clearly, there are Ethiopians who have been part of gross violations of human rights. There are Ethiopians who have been part of gross violations of human rights. Likewise, the administration.
He said such inaction by the U.S. sends a wrong signal to nefarious and authoritarian actors across the globe.
I think one of our challenges in our sanctions policy, more broadly defined, is if you're committing human rights violations, as clearly it is happening in Tigray and in Ethiopia, if you're committing human rights violations in Sudan, and for that fact in other places of the world, and yet we don't sanction them when we have full knowledge of it, then what is the global message? What is the global message to other nefarious and authoritarian actors in the world about, well, they pick and choose when they want to do it? And I understand broader policy constructs and sanctions within that context, but I also think there is a gnawing question for those of us who are big advocates for human rights and democracy about the lack of our sanction policy when it is so clear and obvious that there are parties here that are clearly have blood on their hands, and yet, and it's not that we don't know who they are, we do, and we don't pursue them. I think that's a problematic set of circumstances as we deal in a broader policy construct, but certainly as it relates to these countries, because I have a feeling that as it relates particularly to Ethiopia, some of your colleagues have an aspiration, but it is not an aspiration that's being realized. In the interim, 500,000 people have been killed. So how long do you wait before the aspiration is realized until you use one of your tools of peaceful diplomacy? We only have a handful of them.
African members at the UN Security Council have put efforts to put the Ethiopian conflict on their agenda. Africa Intelligence, in an article it published under the title Imbroglio over Tigray at UN Security Council, Paris, throughout September tried in vain to put the conflict in Ethiopia on their agenda of the UN Security Council, which it was chairing. African members at the UN Security Council backed the Beijing and Moscow, which frustrated the effort moving forward. Our final update for today, the News Emmy awards a profound journalist in a category for outstanding research of the journalism documentary News Goes to Ethiopia, exposing the hallmarks of genocide. Nima El-Bagir, who's the chief international investigative correspondent for CNN, widely known for covering some of the most heinous atrocities that have been committed throughout this ongoing genocide for almost 2 years within the northern region of Ethiopia, won in the category, once again, of outstanding research on her coverage. Let's take a listen.
And the Emmy goes to CNN can reveal, based on documentary evidence and witnesses' accounts, Ethiopian Airlines has been transporting weapons between Ethiopia and Eritrea since the beginning of the war in Ethiopia that has seen thousands killed. According to aviation experts, this would constitute a violation of aviation law.
Nima made a remark on her achievements on her official Twitter account, saying, "To Tigray, survivors, victims, and their families, thank you for entrusting us with your stories. The recognition for our body of work in Ethiopia serves to counter the false narratives around the reality of what's taking place in Tigray. I'm so incredibly proud to lead this wonderfully dogged team," she said. On that note, that wraps up our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.